Indian philosophical tradition is rich in its focus on mental processes and reflections of on human consciousness, self, mind, body relations, and a variety of mental functions such as cognition, perception, illusion, attention, and reasoning, etc. Unfortunately, philosophical roots in India, the development of the discipline in India continues to be dominated by Western psychology, although some attempts have been made to find points of departure, departure both within the country and abroad. These attempts have tried to establish the truth value of various as, asset, asset, assertions in India. Philosophical traditions through scientific studies, the modern era of Indian psychology began in the Department of Philosophy at Calcutta University, where the first syllabus of experimental psychology was introduced and the first psychology laboratory was established in 1915. Calcutta University started the first department of psychology in the year 1916. The and another department of applied psychology in 1938, beginning of modern experiment psychology at Calcutta University was greatly influenced by the Indian psychologist Dr. N. Sengupta, who was trained in USA in the experimental tradition of Wundt. Professor G. Bose was trained in Freudian psychoanalysis, another area which influenced the early development of psychology in India. Professor Bose established Indian psychoanalytical association in which 1922 psych, departments of psychology in the universities of Mysore and Patna were other early centuries of teaching, and Patna were other early centuries of teaching and research in psychology. From these modest beginning, modern psychology has grown as a strong discipline in India with a large number of centers of teaching, research, and application. There are two centers of excellence in psychology supported by the UGC at Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, and the University of Allahabad. About 70 university offer course in psychology. Durganand Sinha, in his book Psychology in a Third World Country, the Indian Experience, published in 1986, traces the history of modern psychology as a social science in India in four phases, according to him. The first phase, till independence, was a phase with emphasis on experimental science. psychoanalytical, analytic, and psychological testing research, which primarily reflected the development of the discipline in Western countries. The second phase, till the 1960s, was a phase of expansion of psychology in India into different branches of psychology. In this phase, Indian psychologists showed a desire to have an Indian identity by seeking to link Western psychology to the Indian context. They did this by using Western ideas to understand the Indian situation. However, psychology in India sought to become relevant for Indian society. In the past 96 phase of problem oriented research, psychologists become more focused on addressing the problem of the Indian society. Further, the limitations of excessive dependence on Western psychology for our social contexts were also realized. Leading psychologists emphas- emphasized the significance of which research research which is of relevance to our situation. The search for a new identity of psychology in India led to the phase of indigenation, which started, if I'm wrong, please correct me, which started during the late 1970s. Besides rejecting the Western framework, Indian psychologists stressed the need for developing an understanding based on framework which was culture, culturally and socially relevant. This trend was also reflected in some attempts to develop psychological approaches based on traditional Indian psychology, which came from our ancient texts and scriptures. Thus, this phase is chariot, ca- characterized by development in indigenous psychology, which originated from the Indian cultural contexts and was relevant for society and Indian psychology based on the Indian traditional knowledge system. While these developments continue, psychology in India is making significant contributions to the field of psychology. In the world, it has become more contextual, emphasizing the need for developing psychological principles which are rooted in our own social and cultural contexts. Alongside, we also find that new research that new research studies involving interfaces with neurobiological and health science are being carried out. Psychology in India is now being applied in diverse professional areas. Not only have psychologists been working with children having a special problem, they are employed in hospitals as clinical psychologists, in corporate organization, in the HRD, and advertising department in sports di- directioner di- di- directorates in the development sector and in IT industry. Branches of psychology. अरे यार जस्ट हैविंग सम प्रॉब्लम रे यार कहाँ गया ये कहाँ गया किसने कितने नंबर पे थे हम अरे यार understanding mind and behavior हो गया branches of psychology. Yes. Various fields of specialization in psychology have emerged emerged over the years. Some of these are discussed in this section. Cognitive psychology investigates investigates mental process involved in acquisition, storage, manipulation, and transformation of information received from the environment along with its use and communication. The major cognitive processes are are attention, perception, memory, reasoning, problem solving, decision making, and language. You you will be studying these topics later in this textbook. In order to study these cognitive processes, psychologists conduct experiments in laboratory settings. Of them also follow an ecological approach, an approach which focuses on the environmental factors to study cognitive processes in a natural setting. Cognitive psychologists often collaborate with neuroscientists and computer scientists. Biological psychology focuses on the relationship between behavior and the physical system, including the brain and the rest of the nervous system. The immune system and genetics, biological psychologists often collaborate with neuroscientists, zoo- zoologists, and anthropologists. Neuropsychology has emerged a field of research where psychologists and neuroscientists are working together. Researchers are studying the role of neurotransmitters of or chemical substances which are responsible for neural communication in different areas of the brain and therefore associated mental functions. They do their research on people with normal functioning brain as well as people with damaged brain by following advanced technology like EEG, PET, and MRI, fMRI, etc. about which you will study later. Developmental psychology, that's the physical, social, and psychological changes that occur at different ages and stages over a lifespan. From conception to old age, The primarily concern of developmental psychologists is how become what we are. For many years, the major emphasis was on child and a- ab- adolescence, adolescent development. However, today an increasing number of developmental psychologists show strong interests in adult development and aging. They focus on the biological, socio-cultural, environmental factors that influence psychological uh, charac- character characteri- characteristics such as intelligence, cognition, emotion, temperament, morality, and social relationship. Development psychologists collaborate with anthropologists, education, educationists, neurologists, social workers, counselors, and almost every branch of knowledge where there is a concern for growth and development of a human being. Social psychology explore how people are affected by their social environments, how people think about the how people think about and influence others. Social psychologists are interested in such topics as attitudes, conformity, and obedience to authority, interpersonal attraction, helpful behavior, prejudice, aggression, social motivation, intergroup relations, and so on. Cross culture and cultural psychology examines the role of culture in understanding behavior, thought, and emotion. It assumes that human behavior is not only reflection of human biological potential but also a product of cultural. Therefore, behavior should be studied in this socio-cultural context as you will be studying in different chapters of this book. Cultural culture influence human behavior in many ways and in varying degrees. Environmental psychology studies the intersection of physical factors such as temperature, humidity, pollution, and natural dis- disaster on human behavior. In influence of physical arrangement of the workplace on health, the emotional state, and interpersonal relations are also investigated. Current topics of research in the field are the to which the extent to which disposal of waste, population explosion, conservation of energy, efficient use of community resources are associated with and are functions of human behavior. Health psychology focuses on the role of psychological factors, for example, stress, anxiety in the development, prevention, and treatment of illness. Areas of interests for a Health psychologists are stress and coping, the relationship between psychological factors and health patient doctor relationship and ways of promoting health changing factors. Um, Clinical and counseling psychology deals with causes, treatment, and prevention of different types of psychological disorders such as anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and chronic substance abuse. A related area is counseling, which aims to improve everyday functioning by helping people solve problems in daily living and cope more effectively with a challenging situation. The work of clinical psychologists does not differ from that of counseling psychologists, although counseling psychologists sometimes deals with people who have less serious problems. In in many instances, counseling psychologists work with students, advising them about personal problem and career planning. Like clinical psychologists, psychiatrists also study the cause, treatment, and prevention of psychological disorder. How are clinical psychologists and psychiatrists different? A clinical psychologist has a degree in psychology, which includes in intensive training in treating people with psychological disorder. In contrast, a psychiatrist has a medical degree with years of specialized training in the treatment of psychological disorder. One important distinction is psychiatrists can prescribe medicines and give electroshock treatment, whereas clinical psychologists cannot. Industrial organizational psychology deals with workshop behavior, focusing on both the workers and organizations that employ them. Industrial organizational psychologists are concerned with training employee, improving work conditions, and developing criteria for selecting employee. For example, an organizational psychologist might recommend that company may adopt a new management structure that would increase communication but managers and staff. The background of industrial and organizational psychologists often includes training in cognitive and social psychology. Educational psychology with studies how people of all ages learn. Educational psychologists primarily help develop instructional methods and materials used to train people in both educational and work settings. They are also concerned with research on issues of relevance for education, counseling, and learning problems. A related field, school psychology, focuses on designing programs that promote intellectual, social, and emotional development of children, including those with special needs. They try to apply knowledge of psychology in school setting. Sports psychology applies psychological principles to improve sports performance by enhancing their motivation. Sports psychology is a relatively new field but is gaining acceptance worldwide. Other emerging branches of psychology, the interdisciplinary focuses on research and application of psychology, has led to the emergence of varied areas like aviation, psychology, space psychology, military. Other emerging psychology in interdisciplinary focuses focus on research and application of psychology has led to the emergence of va- varied areas like aviation psychology, space psychology, military psychology, for forensic psychology, rural psychology, engineering psychology, managerial psychology, community psychology, psychology of human, and ethical psychology, to name a few. Try the activity 1.3 or to reflect upon your interests area in psychology. Terms, themes of research and application. In the previous section, you got some ideas of the various branches of psychology. If you were to ask a simple question of that about what psychologists do, the usual answer will be that they do several things while working in a variety of settings. However, if you try to analyze their work, you will notice that they basically engage in two kinds of activities. One is research in psychology, the other is application of psychology. What are some of the themes which provide direction to research and application of psychology? There are several such themes. We will focus on some of them. Theme 1: psychology, like other science, attempts to develop principles of behavior and mental processes. In research, the main concern is with the understanding and explanation of behavior and mental events and processes. Psychologists who choose to engage in research function more like other scientists like them. They draw con- conclusions which are supported by data. They design and conduct experiments or studies under controlled conditions on a wide range of psychological phenomena. the purpose to develop general principles about behavior and mental processes. The conclusion drawn on the basis of such studies apply to everybody and are therefore universal experimental com- comparative psychological developmental social differential and abnormal psychology are generally regarded as domains res- representing basic psychology. The theme of research in this field differ from each other. For example, experimental psychologists study the process of perception, learning, memory, thinking, and motivation, etc., using experiment as their method of inquiry, where, 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 whereas psychological psychologists attempt to examine developmental psychologists study quality qualitative and quantitative changes in behavior from the beginning of human life to its end, whereas social psychologists focus on the study of experience and behavior of individuals as they take place in social contexts. Theme 2: human behavior is a function of the attributes of person and environment. Kurt Lewin first proposed the famous equation P equals FPE, which suggests that the product of a person and his environment. What this equation simply tells us in is that is that the variation we find in human behavior are largely due to the fact that persons differ with respect to their various attributes because of their genetic endowments and diverse experiences. So the so do the environments they are placed in. Here the environment is conceptualized as it is per- perceived or made sense by the person. Psychologists have for a long time considered that no two individuals are the same. If one if one considered their psychological attributes, they vary with they they vary with respect to their intelligence, interests, values, aptitudes, and various other personality characteristics.